Welcome to the ReInvent Your World broadcast. My name is Donna Woolham, and I'm your host. My goal is for every woman to know that God loves you and He's for you. And no matter where you are today, you can start right now and create an incredible new life. Let's get started into the show, okay? Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ReInvent Your World podcast. We are heart deep into the Women in Ministry series. And today I have the honor of introducing Reverend Christine Vaughn Davies. And Christine is an ordained Presbyterian minister, a certified educator with the Association of Clinical Pastoral Education, a seminary professor, and a trained spiritual director. And don't worry if you don't know what some of that is, because she's going to talk to us about that today. Christine is a writer and a speaker, and she shares all kinds of stories from the work she's done as a chaplain. And her hope is that it will help normalize grief and allow all of us to live more fully in the moments. Christine, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I'm so very honored to be a part of this series and to be a guest and get to have a conversation with you. Thanks for having me.
So honored. Christine, I love to get a little peek into the everyday lives of our guests. I like to say that we're all a little bit voyeuristic. That's why social media is so popular and why we like to see what our friends are up to and see what people are up to. So if you will allow us, would you give us a little look into what your everyday life is like?
Sure. It's not all that exciting, but I will certainly detail it for folks. So the first thing you have to know about me is I get up very, very early in the morning. Some of that is by design. Sometimes I don't sleep all that well and never have, but others is because I work in a hospital. So the day starts very early. So I am usually up and out of the house by 4:30 a.m. and I drive to work. I will sometimes work out in the hospital gym and then start my day. And that usually involves having a conversation with the chaplain that has been there overnight, finding out what went on, helping them to say goodbye and to leave and taking over their caseload. Sometimes it is giving them a word of encouragement or a prayer should they need it. Then I have a lot of meetings. So I am a hospital chaplain and I'm also an administrator. So the bulk of what I do these days is run the department. So I have a number of chaplains that report to me, as well as CPE, which stands for Clinical Pastoral Education students, essentially chaplain interns who are sometimes local clergy or seminarians who are others who are interested in learning what a chaplain is. So I usually start my day with some leadership meetings. Then I have a meeting with my whole department going over, what are the cases going on today? Who are the patients that we want to prioritize? What families have made requests? How we might prioritize our day. And then I'm usually meeting one-on-one with a lot of folks. So whether those are some of my students or my staff, we also provide care for other employees in the hospital as well. So they will often come in and seek counsel. And I often will do patient care as well. And so that might be a piece of it. And sometimes I can go to the bathroom at some point or sneak in a protein bar for lunch. I do have a lot of coffee. So if you were to see me, I would probably have a coffee cup in my hand. And the reason I go into work early is also so I can leave early because I do have 2 elementary school aged kids. So I try to get home by 3:30 so that I can greet them off of the bus. They are 8 and 10 and have a lot of energy. And so my afternoons is usually spent with them, chauffeuring them around to soccer, basketball, or piano, and the like. And then my evenings, I have a private practice, so I will frequently be meeting with individual people for spiritual direction. My husband, thankfully, makes dinner most nights so that I don't have to worry about that because I'm not a very good cook either. And then sometimes there's other committee meetings for boards that I serve on. So it is quite busy.
And I mean, that's incredible. All of that, all that stuff, all the things. But you also live on a 34-acre farm and you have bees in a garden and chickens and all of that to take care of too, right?
Yeah, so I shared a typical day in winter because it is winter now, but in the spring and summer, it does look very different. I'm popping out to check on the chickens, although they did just start laying their eggs the other day, which is the first sign of spring after a winter hiatus of them
Oh.
not laying, which is especially good given the price of eggs in stores
Yes.
right now. But yeah, so on in the spring and the summer, there is certainly a lot of outdoor time, a lot of weeding and checking on animals. And my 10-year-old is trying to talk us into getting goats. So that might be a spring project as well, bringing goats to our homestead.
Oh my goodness. It just sounds so lovely, Christine. I know that it must be just so busy, but it sounds so lovely on this side of peeking into your world. So thank you for that so much. Thank you. We are in this series about women in ministry. And one of the things that I love to know, and I know that all of us who are listening love to know, is how was that journey for you? How did you find yourself called to the ministry? And especially because you have gone through the steps not only of serving in ministry, but you have a Master's of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary, a Master of Social Work degree from Rutgers. You have done a lot of in-depth education and training in a different kind of way than maybe some people think of. So how did all of that start for you?
So it started going to my local Presbyterian church. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and my parents took us to church every Sunday. And much to the bewilderment of the rest of my family, I really took to it. My sisters have not been to church since my ordination many years ago. So it was not their cup of tea, but it was mine. I loved going to youth group. I served as a deacon as a youth. I was in the bell choir. And to me, it was just being in the sanctuary. It was so easy to feel God's presence. And I was convinced of God's presence in my life from a really early age. And I was also convinced that God wanted me to help people. I didn't know what that looked like at the time. My mother was a nurse. And so I think she really pushed me to consider medicine. And I thought, okay, maybe God wants me to help the most people by becoming a physician. And so even as a kid, I would read through the Merck Medical Dictionary or play with my mother's stethoscope. And I wound up becoming a volunteer in hospitals back when we actually wore the candy striping uniform, which the volunteers don't have to wear now, but the red and white striped pinafore. And after doing that for a little while, I began volunteering. I was trained to become an emergency medical technician and was in the backs of ambulances, really transporting patients to the hospital. And it was there that I could do minor things. I could wrap a wound or administer oxygen. But I wound up holding people's hands while they were scared and bearing witness to their suffering and really trying to comfort them in this crisis. And that's when I realized, oh, that's much of what I'm doing now. I'm with people in their pain. And around the same time, I had a health crisis of my own and was in and out of hospitals, including one I used to work for. And was really dismayed by some of the bedside manner of the physicians I was being treated by. And it was at that same time that my church that I was attending had just gotten a brand new associate pastor right out of Princeton Theological Seminary, actually. And I didn't even know that I hadn't seen that many women pastors previous to this. And she took me out to dinner and just talked about what it was like to go through all these ups and downs. And I did have a diagnosis ultimately of generalized epilepsy. And she talked about, how that was impacting my relationship with God and other aspects of my life. And looking back on that later, I realized, oh, that was spiritual care. That's what I now do for others and now teach others how to do. I found more healing and renewal in our, simple conversation than I did, in any of the bottles of medication or any of the tests that I was taking. Now, don't get me wrong, I still take my medication and I'm grateful for, healthcare. And that's why I work in healthcare. But it really helped me to see that there are other ways to heal people. And what I was looking for in that moment was that emotional and spiritual connection, as well as, I do have a neurologist who I work very closely with now. So that took me to seminary, but I wasn't ever convinced of where in seminary I wanted to be. I had interned in churches, but didn't think that that was really for me. And so the seminary I was at did have a degree program where you could also get a Master's of Social Work degree at as well as your MDiv in a shortened time frame. So I did that, and I thought I would be a counselor for clergy. That was what I went in thinking, and I kind of do that now in a little different way, or work in a nonprofit or something on that front. And I did work as a cognitive behavioral therapist for a little while, and I was working at a community mental health center with drug mandated clients, so they had to come see me for therapy, or they went to jail. So they weren't the most motivated to actually do any systemic changes. But I did a lot of the intakes. And when I did the intakes with them, and this was on paper, because the computers were invented. We were just very poor in the community mental health sector. But I would have like a 64-page document that I would go through. And I remember on the bottom of page, I think it was like 36, after I had gone into full detail of, their whole life story, of all of these ins and outs, there was this one question at the very bottom of the page that said, is faith or spirituality important to you? Yes or no? And if yes, there was one line. And as I was coming to that line, I would get so excited. And then sometimes I would say, nope, and I'd have to go to the next question. And I was like, oh, I just want to spend all my time in that question with people. And that's what took me to I did an internship in a hospital and then went back and did a residency studying chaplaincy and just fell in love with it. And so that's what got me into hospital chaplaincy. And now, as I said before, I run the department, but I also teach others how to be a chaplain and really how to engage others who are suffering.
Mm. Well, and I will just say that your story of your experience as a patient, and we went through, my listeners know that my husband went through a lot of critical illness and passed away. I spent hours and hours, weeks and weeks in hospitals next to him. And some of the medical professionals were incredible and some were incredible in the other way. So, but there were those chaplains, those people who would come in, the people who, the nurses and doctors who had a spiritual heart to care for people. There was just so much evidence in that. And there was so much peace and rest and being able to be in that place. And even in hospice, when my husband was passing, the chaplain that we had was just so wonderful, incredible. So chaplaincy, I think that people don't really understand the power of chaplaincy until you desperately are in need of someone to intervene for you in ways whenever you feel really kind of powerless to be able to reach for help. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do and for the people that you teach to serve and to love others that way. So thank you for that work that you're doing. Part of what we've talked about also is that you mentioned this just kind of in passing, the social work with other people in ministry or pastors. Is that where your spiritual director comes in? Or is that something that any person could reach out to find help with you as a spiritual director or with another person in spiritual director?
Yes, a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
So first, let me say, I'm glad that in a time of your deep grief, that there were people around you to help and to support you. And it may be helpful for our listeners. I realize I didn't necessarily say what a chaplain is, and you're right. Those who know have usually had an experience where they've encountered a chaplain in the hospital because of some suffering and some loss. And so a chaplain is where essentially I like to think of us as an extra layer of emotional and spiritual support for patients, for families, as well as the staff. You're most likely to engage with a chaplain in a hospital or a hospice situation, as you mentioned. There are, of course, college chaplains, and there are other corporate chaplains. It's a little bit different than a healthcare chaplain, but oftentimes it's a similar background. And to be a hospital chaplain, you have to have a master's degree in divinity or theology or a related field. And then you have to do 1,600 hours of postgraduate training, which is called clinical pastoral education, or CPE, which I teach. And that training helps you to know how to be with people of all faith traditions and no faith tradition, and helps you to know a little and a lot about what people in certain religions may anticipate or need while they're hospitalized. And the bulk of the work is really psychodynamic in nature, akin to, I think, a therapeutic program, having been in one of those as well, where you are learning how your own experiences come into play when you're with patients, and you're learning, what to say and what not to say, and how to be empathetic, and how to care for yourself while you are caring for other people who are often in the depths of despair. But then, 80% of what we do is usually end of life. And then some of it is, we will just go around and check in with people, because even if someone is there in the hospital for a routine visit, oftentimes hospitalizations bring up all sorts of emotions. Someone could be reminded of their mortality in a really significant way. Or sometimes I'll see a patient and they said that they hadn't been to the hospital since, saying goodbye to their mother.
Wow.
And so all of that grief, just comes flooding back. So I like to tell people I am not the church police. Sometimes as soon as I walk the door to a patient's room, they'll give me a confession. Oh, chaplain, I don't go to church, or they'll apologize for cursing, or, something like that. I say that, no, that is not my role. My role is to be with them and to allow them to talk about what's really going on for them emotionally and spiritually. And so for your listeners who are in ministry, who might be thinking, oh, I might want to do some of this work, I would advise you to seek out CPE at your local hospital. If they have it, you can always contact me and I can hook you up with a program that has it. And it's really also a discernment path. So a lot of denominations will require people within their ordination process to go through a unit of CPE so that they know how to care for their people. Even if they do not want to be a chaplain, the same skills come up when people are in the parish or church-based scenarios. So that can be a really powerful tool or a course that people go through. And then that's where I do some of my kind of therapy with clergy, because I am meeting with people individually and that are in that program. So sometimes it is, as I said before, clergy that want to sharpen their pastoral care skills, or sometimes it's people just starting out in seminary, or maybe they're on their second or third career, but testing seminary out as an option, and chaplaincy in specific. And so that's when we are talking about their own grief and how their grief is coming up for them while they're sitting with others in their pain. But the spiritual direction element is a little different and a little similar. It started because a lot of the relationships I had in the hospital were more short-term. Of course, we want our patients to get better and to go home. And my students, are with me for a time, usually an academic year or a summer, but then they graduate and go on to do, lovely things. And I found that I was missing getting to be with people and seeing what the Spirit was doing in their life over time. So that you can become a trained spiritual director. It's usually a 2-year program that people go through. And I didn't even know what a spiritual director was until I was in seminary, and I grew up in the church. And it's this best kept secret of the church, which really shouldn't be. But it involves meeting with someone. Usually I meet with individuals once a month, sometimes once every 2 weeks if we're starting out or if they're going through something significant. And we're listening to the Spirit or God's leading together in their sessions. The majority of the people I meet with now are on Zoom, although if people are in New Jersey, I'm happy to meet with them in person on the farm. You can come to my office.
Mm.
And we meet for about 50 minutes or so. And sometimes I'll open in prayer, we'll open in silence, or we'll open with a reading. And I have more of a contemplative bent. So there's, a really gentle way of just hearing what is going on in someone's life. And again, the bulk of what I do is listen. And there might be times where I can point something out that I'm seeing or patterns over time. Sometimes we will try on different spiritual practices that the person may be considering trying out. And we're just looking at what are the invitations, from God today here for you. And it's I had done it myself before I became trained, and it was just such a phenomenal practice for my own spiritual life. I thought, oh, I have to get trained in this, and it's such a joy for me to be able to do it with other people.
Mm. I love that. I love how you said try on different spiritual practices. That's such a beautiful picture. Going to see if this fits, if it
Mhm.
works, if it makes sense for you. Mm.
Yes, and without judgment, because sometimes I hear from my spiritual directees, a lot of whom are clergy, but some aren't, and some are. Right now, the majority of my folks are Christian, but you can be spiritual. You can have spiritual directors of all religions or of multi religions as well. So yeah, sometimes my spiritual directees will say, "Oh, I feel guilty because I don't read the Bible for an hour every day, or I don't meditate for 45 minutes." So, like, we can do much simpler things than that.
Mm.
So even if it's trying out some silence together, or sometimes people don't like silence. So it may be, I read them a poem or a prayer, and we think about that. Or the other day I was doing Visio Divina with someone, which
Mm.
is looking at a picture
Yeah.
and looking at it and it's a step process. People might know Lectio Divina. That's a common one that you do with a piece of scripture. So it's almost like the same thing, but with a picture that you're reading into what God's invitation may be for you in this visual image. So yeah, there's so many different practices out there that are going to resonate differently for different people. Or sometimes individuals will connect with one practice for a season and then looking for something else in a different season.
Yeah. Because aren't we so beautifully, wonderfully created individually by our Maker? It
Mm,
would make sense that some things would resonate with one and others with another
hmm
because He's created us so beautifully and individually, fearfully
Yeah.
and wonderfully, which I'm crazy about that scripture. The way that
It's
it's
a good one.
fearfully and wonderfully.
Mm,
One of the things that I'm curious about is you grew up knowing that you had this bent towards service and toward the church. And it's just been something that's been part of who you are. You so beautifully described to us the journey that you went through in that. I have two questions for you. There are two sides of a coin. And one is a time when ministry was really hard for you and you had to find your way through and who the Lord showed Himself to be for you in that space. And then after that, I'd like for us to talk about a really beautiful moment in ministry when you just felt like, oh, I am so doing what I was created to do. So, can you share with us maybe a time that was just more difficult and how you encountered the Lord and who He showed Himself to be for you?
mm. Yes, fortunately, I have many more examples of the time where I do feel like I am walking in my calling, so to speak. But one time that was very difficult for me was during COVID. And especially in the early days in New Jersey, we were one of the early surges of the first wave. And I remember, crying to my husband that this is the first time in my life I don't want to go to work. I didn't want to work in a hospital and was scared about what that meant for me to, expose myself to this, virus at the time that we had no idea, what it was going to do or how you even transmitted it. And felt like I was putting my family at risk. So I think it was just this deep fear and dread. And, I did wind up, we were fortunate in that I have a guest room in my house that I was able to, quarantine myself a bit away from my family, but my kids were also young and, not being able to hug my kids for fear of giving them something that I was getting while fulfilling my ministry was really hard. And part of what I enjoy about my work and what got me into chaplaincy in the beginning, was being with people when they are dying and saying goodbye to their loved ones. And it can be a really hard place to be in, but there can also be beauty in it. And helping people with that and through that has been a profound place to be. However, during COVID, there weren't the good deaths that I was used to helping people have, and to having these rituals around saying goodbye and to being present in the room as people are kind of holding vigil and telling stories about their loved one. There was none of that because, visitors weren't allowed in the hospital. And actually, even before those mandates were made, I had patients that were dying in the hospital, not of COVID, but of, cancer or other terminal illnesses. But their families were too afraid to come to the hospital to be with them because they were afraid of contracting COVID, even though the person didn't have it. So I think that was really hard for me, to hold up iPads and phones and to try to facilitate closure in that way, while being fearful myself and kind of everyone going through it together. And that is what got me through that time, was really leaning into spiritual direction. And I think that's when I signed up to do the training even, partly because I thought I can't work in a hospital anymore. I am depleted. I want a job where I can work from home, like the rest of like many of
Like the
others
rest
in
of
the
the
world.
world.
Right. Yes. I was so jealous and so angry for so long about that. But then, thankfully that did not last, and things got better. One moment during COVID that helped me was a lot of hospitals were playing songs when a COVID patient, a patient with COVID was getting discharged. Because so often we were seeing the opposite. We were seeing multiple deaths a day, lots and lots of deaths a day. And so the song that my hospital was playing, it was a couple of bars of Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles. I'm not going to sing it because I cannot sing. That is not one of my spiritual gifts. And I think my church that I go to, or my Presbyterian, had asked me to write a reflection on what it was like being there in COVID, and it was just so hard for me to write. But part of what I shared was, when I heard that song, I rephrased it for myself of not sun as S-U-N, but thinking of it as sun, S-O-N.
Yeah.
And really recognizing, God is here in this midst, even if I do not know, how God is in this, God is in this and with us all going through it. And thankfully that helped to get me through, and to get many of us. I think a lot of us had a dark night of the soul experience in the midst of COVID. So that would be one area where I did question a lot of my calling and why I chose to go into this. That has passed. I do love my job again, and that's why I work so hard and do so many hours of it. And to answer your other part of the question, fortunately, like I said, I have those moments multiple times a day. So in my spiritual direction practice, when one of my spiritual directees is sharing something and saying like, "Oh, I've never told anyone this before," or saying something aloud about who they believe God to be for the first time, it just brings tears to my eyes that people are able to connect to their creator in that deep way, and that I just get to witness it. And I feel so fortunate to be in that space. And then the same is true for my students. I get to watch them discover their gifts for chaplaincy and for being with people and really come into their own. And I certainly give them lots of guidance, and we have lots of lessons about how they could improve their skills. And getting, watching them from the beginning of our time together to the very end, and just seeing how much they've grown, helps me tremendously to know that I am absolutely doing the right thing right now.
Thank you for your vulnerability and your transparency in that. Christine, wow, really, thank you. I think when you're talking about your story in COVID, that each one of us listening has a story somewhere around that. And for you to be able to share your heart on that and what it was like in those moments, so powerful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for listening to it.
You have a lot of responsibilities. You have family, you have your personal life and journey, you have your training and education, your administration. It can be easy in the midst of all the work that we're doing for the Lord to leave him out of our individual life. So how do you make sure that you are staying connected to the Lord in the middle of all of the requirements?
Yeah, and that's some of the reason that I love, doing the spiritual direction, because I'm praying with people all the time and getting to see God moving in others people's lives. So that helps me to feel connected in those moments. I do enjoy meditation. I particularly do centering prayer, which is a specific type of Christian meditation, which again is like this best kept secret, which is focusing on a prayer word or sacred word and using that to connect with God. So that is one area that really grounds me. I also will do a lot of journaling, and I engage in a practice that a lot of writers use called morning pages. You've heard of it? Yeah.
I am a morning page, right?
Are you really? See, this is why we're getting along so well. Yeah, so I mean, you'll have to tell me your experiences, but I find that a lot of times when I'm doing it, just keeping that pen moving, and I guess for your listeners that don't know, it's writing 3 pages of long form handwriting in the morning, kind of stream of consciousness, not reflective journaling, which is a little different. And it's from Julia Cameron. She talks about it in her book, The Artist's Way, which if you're someone who's looking to engage in spirituality and creativity, it's a great resource. So I do that. And oftentimes by the end, I will realize, oh, now I'm praying to God. It has just turned into a prayer. Now, don't get me wrong. There are also times where I'm just writing, my pen is running out of ink, or my hand hurts, or my kids are being really loud and distracting me. But that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to just kind of let it all out. But for me, it's so meaningful when it does turn into this prayer, or sometimes it's this answered prayer. And I realize, oh, this prayer that I had the other day got answered for me in a new and different way. So those are just some of the grounding ways that I connect with God throughout my day.
Yes, I love that. I do. I have a lot of those pages I'm writing because I'm supposed to be writing, and this is what I'm writing until all of that begins to break loose. So I do really enjoy all of that. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And so many beautiful things there about centric prayer and having that sacred word and meditation. Wonderful, wonderful advice. What does a person need to do to get in touch with you, Christine?
Yeah, so the best way would probably be to visit my website, which is christinevdavies.com. They can certainly get in touch with me if they're interested in CPE. I can help them find a center to go to. I also do individual spiritual direction. There are also, I should say, there are some spiritual directors that do group spiritual direction. I don't at this time. I just do individual. And then another way, if they want to get in touch or hear from me more often, is I do have a newsletter on Substack that I write long form articles, usually about twice a month. And I'll usually incorporate spiritual practices or stories from my work in the hospital or with spiritual directees. Like I just actually wrote one about morning pages and
Oh.
creativity the other day. That's why it was on my mind. And how we connect creativity with spirituality. So those would be the best ways. And also all my social media links are on there as well.
Wonderful. And for everyone who's listening and you're running around or you're getting ready for your morning, driving to work, jogging, whatever you're doing, do not fear. All of Christine's links and her information are in the show notes. So be sure and go back and grab all of those. Christine, has been such a beautiful conversation. I really have enjoyed your heart and your compassion and your passion for the work that you do. As we're finishing up today, I'm thinking about the woman who is maybe wondering what she should do next and how she can continue to grow in her love for the Lord and her service for God. Maybe she's struggling a little bit, having her own dark night of the soul. What would you say to this sister who's listening today?
I think the biggest thing that you can do in this moment is to be gracious to yourself, to give yourself the same care that you would give your friend or a family member or someone else in your ministry. Oftentimes, we will be harder on ourselves than we are on anyone else. So to be gentle with yourself and to give yourself some space and some grace to figure out what it is that you're needing. And I find when we are in that dark night of the soul, and I wrote an article about this too, so that may be helpful for people that are going through it. One of the things that we need in that moment is to find others to show us a little bit of light in that time. And so I would encourage you to reach out to someone, whether it's a spiritual director, whether it's a good friend. Certainly, if you're in the hospital, you can reach out to a chaplain, but my hope is that's not the case for you. But to not have to be alone in your suffering, to know that there are plenty of people that will hold that with you and be with you in it. And that's where I think healing can come.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful final word, and thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it was so lovely. Thank you.
Hey, it's Donna. Thanks so much for being with me on the program today. If you like what you've heard, I hope you'll go ahead and follow me and leave me a review and a comment. It means so much to me. And if you're curious about what it would look like for us to work together, head on over to my website at donnawoolham.com. You'll find all the information there and some free resources to help you on your journey to wholeness. Thanks again. See you next time.